live stream. I'm gonna check here.
All right.
All right, you guys see it?
I think so. Let me get it up.
Check on my phone.
Yeah, let's
I don't know whether or not we're full screen on this thing or not.
Yeah, I can go. We can go speaker view. So now, if you talk, you'll be the main.
All right. Either way,
there's two different ways.
Yeah.
We'll switch it up. There's not a whole lot of options, but
we're all figuring this out.
Yeah.
Live with y'all.
Okay, I'm trying to. You see us live?
Let me see. It says we're live up here.
Okay, sometimes
I don't see it yet, but
yeah, we're up right now, everybody.
What's up, everybody?
How's it going, crew?
Hey, guys.
We're definitely up.
Oh, that's funny. Okay,
I see it. I hear a YouTube ad.
Right,
yeah, that was me pulling it up to go on
Okay,
Twitter.
cool. I need to post the YouTube to.
We're gonna. So basically, guys, what we're doing here is a little bit of a different opening, obviously, because this is a social isolation show. And we're going to post this. We need to go to Patreon in a minute, and then we will come back here, and we're going to play some new dope intro music to the show done by Napoleon the Legend. I'm really excited.
Oh, awesome.
Very exciting intro night for some awesome new TMBS music, joining the great DJ Danarchy Pantheon. And tonight we have a great show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And the post game is going to be really fun. We're going to be doing reading in the post game, and Waz is going to join us to talk about why the fuck does Kevin Durant get a testing kit before anybody else?
Oh yeah, that's good. Hey David, can you post the link to it in one of the something?
Oh yeah. I'll put it in the Google Doc. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I got it. Just got it. There we go.
Cool.
Just,
all right,
for patrons, we're doing 2 extra shows this week. And for everybody else, on Sunday, 3 of us are going to do a think tank episode that is going to be publicly streamed, and we're going to do that sometime on Sunday. So 2 extra Patreon shows, and then a full public think tank with the 3 of us. And I'm sure we'll do more in the interim, because we're all stir crazy and we all need to.
It's great to stay connected too. I'm
really
important. Lucky.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that.
All right, guys. Do you want to hear the new theme song?
Yes, new theme song. I still don't see it. This in my phone because
I posted you up on Twitter.
It's up on Patreon. Did we post it to Twitter?
We're good.
Yeah, I posted it just now.
All right, sweet. Okay, yes, this is Napoleon the Legend. New theme song for the Michael Brooks Show. Ready?
All right, here we go. Oh, let's see. Here we go.
Nice.
How awesome, dude. Behind the scenes.
Hi.
Huh?
I like it. Napoleon the Legend coming through as he always does.
It's awesome.
I like it a lot. It's really my 1990s hip-hop. Welcome to the Michael Brooks Show. We're broadcasting live from social isolation in our various apartments while we think about the neoliberalism, Chernobyl, the coronavirus. With super producer Matt left.
Hello.
Chief economist David Briscom.
How's it going?
All right.
Wow. Getting a little slow for me on my end.
I'm gonna fade out.
But on today's show, we've got a great one for you. We've got the amazing Emma Vigeland. We're going to talk about the DNC going to war against their own people by not postponing elections, the state of the race, the disaster of Joe Biden, and I'm going to give her a little bit of a hard time about Elizabeth Warren. I'm not going to lie. Even in times of such peril, we got to be a little bit petty. Our favorite Emma will be here. And then the great Joshua Kahn Russell. He's executive of the Wildfire Project. He's done a lot of teaching with us on the actual mechanics of organizing. We're going to talk about both some very practical tips around dealing with the situation we're in and not falling into isolation, and maybe taking a very strong break from social media as an example. But we're also going to talk about, it's a cliche, but don't let a crisis go to waste. We're in a serious time of contradiction, and there's opening here that we have to start thinking about taking advantage of. And then, of course, in the post game, Big Waz is going to join us. We're doing a reading series. We each have picked out sections. I've got one of my favorite book, Class Notes by Adolph Reed Jr.
Oh, yeah.
I simply cannot emphasize enough how good this book is. And I've also got, and I don't even know if people can see this, but it's from The Golden Age is in Us, which is a collection of Alexander Coburn essays, because I'm noticing one of the kind of retreats people are doing in their thinking, which I think is actually really ugly and disgusting, is the sort of neo-Malthusian, well, the population does need to go down crap. And if we track that through Ehrlich's Population Bomb and Garrett Hardin's Tragedy of the Commons, which are both, I mean, to be fair, Population Bomb, I think less the intention. Hardin, absolutely a reactionary. I think the Ehrlich's not really trying to necessarily be reactionary, but there is a whole line of basically neo-Malthusian liberal kind of soft eugenics, which needs to be totally excised and discredited. But at any rate, I'll just start with the opening spiel, be a little bit less structured than usual, but I just basically want to say that, I mean, we are here, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, you know, a lot of things that we've been talking about for quite some time in terms of the sort of many crises that we're in simultaneously, right? We're in an ecological crisis. We're in a social crisis. We're in a crisis of capitalist production. We're in all of this. And it was no guarantee that people at the center, I mean, people at the periphery, of course, have been dealing with any number of elements of the crisis for a long time, right? But it was never any guarantee that it wouldn't sort of migrate to the center, if that makes sense, speaking in that Emmanuel Wallerstein sense. And I think I really want us to play with and assert the idea that this is neoliberalism Chernobyl for a couple of reasons. Did you guys watch Chernobyl on HBO? Did you guys watch that?
I'll be honest, I stayed away from it.
It was going to freak me out too much, honestly.
So
I'm down to be freaked out, but I thought I heard some things that it was kind of like propagandistic, and I mean, I'm not a great television watcher anyway, and I avoided it for that reason. But you think it was
Matt was like, yeah, it's fucking propaganda. I'm gonna play Grand Theft Auto.
Exactly.
I don't want to watch anti-communist propaganda.
I mean, there's a couple missions you can make the case.
Car.
You can make the case that Grand Theft Auto is revolutionary with a couple of those missions, but we can move on from that.
Hey, you know what? I am, as a zero video game player, Grand Theft Auto is the only game that I ever tried to play. And I remember like when ages ago at this point, it was the only time where I was at a friend's house, we got high, and he introduced me to Grand Theft Auto, and I was actually relieved that I didn't have money at that moment to get a system, because I was like, I would play this all day. So
I've never thought to do it with weed before.
It was fun.
Oh yeah,
yeah, man. Hey, self-isolation tip. So I can't believe it. By the way, how are we in a world where I thought to do something with weed and you didn't?
Well,
at any rate, it was a good series. It was incredibly well produced, and I'll leave it for other people to sort of litigate the various points of it. I think it's historically undeniable that the Soviet leadership obviously tried to cover and lie in a way to protect themselves politically, and it put people's lives at risk. And the big propaganda on the show was not that happened historically. The big propaganda was the idea that big systems lying and putting people in jeopardy is some type of intrinsic to communism thing. Mm-hmm. That's a fantasy. That is of our imaginative lives. That's part of the deep, deep ideological training we've got into to be where we are today. And I think if we look at just the United States, the Trump administration's, I think we can absolutely call criminal negligence with regards to this crisis, rejecting help from the WHO, not being honest about the scale of it out of the gate, giving mixed information. And then, of course, the whole preceding journey to get here, right? The classic story of neoliberalism, which let's just get really specific about again. Starting in the 1970s, this is a project of political backlash. It's explained in a sort of popular sense of the Keynesian model wore itself out, and we needed to liberalize markets. We needed to make it easier for capital to move around. We needed less regulation and so on. And there's some truth to that. But the other very specific thing that David Harvey points out, and David Harvey really is my kind of guide to neoliberalism as a concept, not just like a buzzword we throw around, is that this is a political backlash, which we can trace to things like the Powell memo. Matt, what's the Powell memo?
I am actually not that great on the Powell memo.
You're not that great on the Powell memo. Anyways,
No.
The Powell memo is a document I think came out in the early 70s. It was a guy who went on to, or late 60s, he would go on to serve in the Nixon administration. I believe he was a Supreme Court pick. And it was basically like, the left is getting too strong. They're getting too strong economically in terms of labor. They're getting too strong in terms of broad social equity, demands, feminism, civil rights movement. We need to counteract this. And so when you think about neoliberalism, you have to think of it as not just this sort of like, this is why distinction making around something just being a natural thing, like the sun sets or rises, versus like politics, which is something we as humans decide, or certain humans decide and other humans don't decide. The rhetoric of neoliberalism, the rhetoric of unregulated capitalism is, this is just a natural force. It's almost like mystical. And we have figured it out, and we have learned to not get in its way. And if we don't get in its way, it will give us a huge amount of wealth. And the truth of the matter is that Thomas Friedman, of all people, was much more honest about it in the 1990s. He said, if you want to succeed, you have to have something he called the golden straitjacket. And the golden straitjacket were the rules of the road for having a lightly regulated, anti-labor, globalized economy. And all of the stuff that goes along with this, attacking labor unions, gutting public health, all of these things, of which the UK has gone pretty far in. No one's gone as far as the United States. And the Europeans, for all of their problems, we're seeing in the last couple of days, they have more basic civilization and decency built in. The French are banning, rent payments and things like that. The Danish have come through with an incredible stimulus and safety program. It's really the United States and the UK, and most extremely the United States, where we are just seeing essentially no response and almost essentially begging Walmart and CVS to figure out a way of getting us out of a global calamity, which threatens so many people's lives and obviously is going to cause extraordinary economic hardship. So what I want to say is that, yes, and here we go. Spain has nationalized all of its private hospitals as the country goes on coronavirus lockdown. So I want us to play, though, with that model of Chernobyl and neoliberalism. And this is the kind of top line thoughts. We're going to be doing a lot more on this on the show, because I actually think, of course, that show was on some sense, kind of crude anti-socialist propaganda. It was also very well produced, very well acted, and terrifying. And of course, again, this isn't a show that's going to romanticize the Soviet Union. So it identified, profound crimes done by the Soviet government of that time. But I want to go on offense, and I want to say, if we took not communism, not socialism, and frankly, this crisis doesn't indict all market activity or all markets. I think we need to actually start to distinguish between markets and capitalism, frankly. I think that's something we're going to need to get a lot more thoughtful about. They are not the same thing. And I'll just say, when we confuse markets and capitalism is like a whole mode of production, right? That allows like silly propagandists for unfettered capitalism that's destroying everything to be like, hey, what, you don't like your farmer's market or your local bookstore?
Yeah.
And that's what none of us are talking about.
Well, it dehistoricizes and naturalizes capitalism because markets have been around way longer than capitalism.
Exactly. And so what I want to say is, if we were to say the Chernobyl indicted a part of the failings of the Soviet Union, and obviously there's many other things about the Soviet Union that were actually great successes, and we need to have a more complex conversation about it. But it was a major, huge catastrophe, and it played a role of many of the complete delegitimization of that government. That's the truth. And I want to say this is the same moment for neoliberalism. Now, it's on top of many, many moments. This should have been the moment in 2008 when Wall Street wiped out trillions of dollars of wealth, when we had an administration come to power on the heels of both a certain type of cultural hope and optimism, and also just the absolute betrayal of Wall Street, promising something different. And all they did was recapitalize banks and have a 10-year recovery through Obama and Trump, which is ending now, that did nothing but line the pockets of the ultra wealthy and further create a new hoarder industry in Silicon Valley. I want to say now, as we're reminded of how precarious life is, not just because of political and economic systems, but like literally, we all know folks that are old. I know people, very close to me dealing with stuff like evictions. It's evil, it's terrifying, and this system is not equipped to deal with it. And that is not a normative statement, that's an objective statement. And so I want this to be a big ideological point and shift, not just for us to protest and repeat and score points on, but for us to actually sit with the reality of it, that this moment is over. I don't know what comes next. We'll talk about that more. But we're done with it.
I think that what we've been seeing, just almost like on like a psychoanalytic level, of the role of the corporation in our lives in response to this crisis. I mean, the fact that Trump was at the Rose Garden with the CEO of Walgreens, and they were using it as an infomercial, was definitely like a very frightening thing, and it's it's very comical. But I mean, open up your inbox. How many people got statements from a myriad of different CEOs? And of course, like, these are massive parts of our economy. So it does matter, what Grubhub is planning to do in response to the coronavirus. I'm not saying that that's not necessarily important, but the fact that there's actually a disconnect between like actually just like kind of public communal spaces that are reaching out to us and this private sphere. And it's been a very weird thing in this what we're calling social distancing moment that we've had over this past few days, to realize that for a lot of people, the communication, the majority of the communication that they're getting is still coming from corporate America and not from communities or families or social organizations. And and that was the neoliberal project too, was to completely socially isolate us. And in a kind of perverse way, on a philosophical level, this is like, the perfect crisis of neoliberalism, and that it actually has created us all as atomized individuals, or at least, small families that were stuck in our room. And it's going to be interesting to see, I think I agree with you completely, Michael, that this is a moment that I think it's a reckoning. It should have happened a lot earlier, but hopefully things become clear to people. And I'll talk about this later during the gem, but you'll see that, a lot of people are realizing how inadequate our system is at taking care of people. Just going on Facebook, I've been seeing, distant family members, people I don't really communicate with that much, really freaking out about, the loss of income that's coming. And people are saying, well, how is it that we don't have any access or any kind of social safety net? And it's like, well, obviously this is something
somebody's been telling you, you dumb motherfuckers.
Exactly. So hopefully this is a wake-up call for a lot of people, and especially when it comes to the healthcare. And hopefully also too, because there's the political aspect, but on a human level, that like we're really able to build up those links. I listened to the New York Times podcast this morning, I know, but it was actually a really sweet one, the devastating one about the doctors in Italy. They interviewed a doctor who had been basically on the front lines outside of Milan, dealing with the coronavirus, and the horrifying decision that you have to make as an individual there. You know, it just really made it clear to me how much of a crisis this is and how we really need to be there for each other. And this is a very unique moment in that this is a global crisis. Capitalism has been a global crisis for a long time, but this is a very apparent crisis that we're all experiencing at the same time together. So hopefully we can continue to build those links too internationally, because they're very much needed.
They're here on this show. It's pretty moving to see people from literally all continents kind of like reach out and say that there's, you know, some relationship. It has to be obviously way bigger and more systemic than this, but the impulse is there, is my point. You have something you want to add to that, Matt?
Not really. David, just watch your shirt on that mic a little bit. It scratches slightly.
Thank you, Matt.
There you go.
Christ, David.
No, it's fine. It was good.
Don't mess up the social isolation show. Come on.
No, I mean, I think it's just it does feel like an era's like we've hopefully, but it feels like we've changed an era. Like the idea that a capitalist would own a hospital is something that I think most people would think is a bit silly nowadays, right? Like, especially like the example of the Philadelphia hospitals that Bernie like campaigned to keep open. Now those, like, clearly we need those beds.
Yeah, clearly. I mean, yeah, and that's also another, I always got to be, I want to be careful about this, but like right now, stay put, stay at home, be safe, don't mess around, 1000%. But don't get used to this either. You know, because I think David, you're completely right. I mean, on that, there, in the sense that I'm talking about in terms of public health, in terms of systems collapse, in terms of human life, this is a distillation that this whole model is a catastrophe for human well-being and we need to stop, right? Mm-hmm. And from the perspective of the neoliberal model, let's have people that we've already, you know, have decided aren't really human anyways, to come get us our food. Did Emma just jump on?
She just joined us. Yeah.
I didn't even realize that I could, once I click join, that I would just be on air.
Well, Emma's like, I'm not waiting.
Hey guys, keep
Hey Emma,
doing what you're doing.
Emma, how you doing?
I'm good. You know, as good as can be expected. What a weird time.
Yeah,
it's insane. So let's you know what? Let's just do a 1 minute like shout out with Emma and just a really, really super tight pitch. And then we'll talk about why Elizabeth Warren fucking sucks.
I texted Michael, I was like, just feel free to shit all over me this time.
We love you. We're not going to shit all over you.
No, I want to welcome it. Just because, like, well, do the pitch and then
Here's the thing. Emma was wrong. All right. So I'll do it. She thought I was a good person, but really I was a deranged 7-year-old sociopath. All right, we'll do more of that in a minute. So, guys, this isn't that high level. If you have the capacity, if you have the ability, right? I'm not laying, believe me, I understand how tight, you know, things are for so many folks, but if you're in a position where you're like, you know, ordering food, taking an Uber, whatever, you gotta, and you have the capacity, you have to tip the fuck out of those people. You have to like do everything you can for people in frontline service worker jobs. Like and this is weird advice for the show in a way, because we're kind of like always talking about what are the systems implications. Like we can't just, you know, it's not on you to make up for a predator economy. We need to nationalize industries. We need powerful labor unions, 110%. And right now in this situation, you have people that, as an example, in New York City, can get stopped on the street, harassed by cops, you know, pay ludicrous fines just for doing their jobs. They're taking an innately higher risk than anybody else because they have to be out and about delivering food. And just, I'm sure, you know, honestly, my confidence would be if you're watching or listening to this, you're probably already somebody who is very considerate of that sort of thing. But I just want to really reiterate that if you have that capacity, be unbelievably good to those people. And if you see, we're going to talk later with Joshua about like taking big social media breaks, which I cannot recommend enough, including to myself. But I would say, like, if you see a video of, you know, a delivery guy getting harassed by NYPD or something as an example, immediately tweet that at de Blasio's account and be like, oh, really? Bernie Sanders guy, huh? Mm-hmm. Like, we got to have 110% backing, you know, for folks in those positions. So that's all I got for kind of a, you know, it's not a traditional shout out, but it's my strong feeling right now. You guys have anything you want to add to that?
I made a grocery trip like a week ago in preparation for this, and I tweeted out after it, like, grocery workers deserve the wealth of bankers. Mm-hmm. You realize how important that is and how on the front lines. And the grocery stores, it looks like, and who knows, things change so fast, but it looks like those are going to stay open in New York. I mean, it's just incredible. And like, maybe they'll get like sick pay, but like, are they getting hazard pay? Like, I want to know like what's actually being done about that. Like, I feel so bad for those people. Like, definitely they'll be exposed to it immediately, right? Like, those are the only things open. People have to go there, and they're barely making over minimum wage if they are. And like I mean, yeah, like I hope they get raises. I hope they get hazard pay, but definitely tip them if you use them, because I mean, the systems thing is those are workers. It's simple enough. Like,
right. That's right. And also, I didn't have time to get to it in the commentary, but I just want to do like a dishonorable and the extreme mention that in the midst of all of this disgustingness, that John Mackey, the hippie sociopath, like worst guy in the world, CEO of Whole Foods.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to bring that up, Michael.
Talk about it, Emma. Explain what he did.
Basically, he said that if you have accumulated paid sick leave, you should donate it to your fellow employees, that talking to employees of Whole Foods who may be exhibiting symptoms, meaning he wasn't going to grant additional sick leave or the ability for people to not work. He was making it incumbent upon the fellow employees to give up their own accumulated sick leave for their colleagues, which is just, I mean, crystallizing the sociopathy of, you know, the neoliberal Whole Foods types.
And also the lie of like because literally his brand is conscious capitalism. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That whole thing of like, because, you know, the truth was, like, relative to similar jobs, I don't even know if this is still true, and it could all be different with an Amazon acquisition, but I think, you know, I've known people who've worked in Whole Foods and stuff, and, you know, relative to that kind of job, they're paid a bit better, and there's like a few more kind of added incentives. And that was his whole thing. It's like, we don't need unions here, we're a team. And of course that was always a lie and total bullshit, but that case study right there should be a pure distillation of just the utter bankruptcy of that whole worldview.
And I'd also add, you know, we were talking about earlier, is like the kind of cheap imitation that we're getting from neoliberalism to the systems that we need, right? It's like, we do need solidarity. We need to look out for each other. Right. But instead of the corporation or the company looking out for its employees, it's, you know, basically demanding that the workers look out for each other, you know, on their own expense. I mean, it's horrific.
And that's been the whole thing with global warming too. Like, yes, absolutely. I think people should all take our own little steps to be conscious and mindful of like our individual footprint, for sure. But the fact that like there's a gazillion articles about your little trivial like pebble in the ocean, well, it's like, no, it's the global energy industry and how our economy runs. And if you deal with that, you know, either or, that's the only way you deal with this stuff. It doesn't matter whether or not you remember to like turn off the faucet when you're brushing your teeth. All right.
Did you guys, just to tag on this, did you see the Virgin Atlantic Richard Branson example?
Yeah.
No, were he and Obama asking for voluntary non-sick people to come to the Caribbean with them?
Yeah, check this out. So Virgin Atlantic says it plans to ground 75% of its fleet by 26th of March, adding staff will be asked to take 8 weeks unpaid leave during the next 3 months. And this Toby J. Peacock says 2 months without wages. Virginia has about 9,000 staff. From what I can see, Richard Branson could personally pay all these staff $500 a week, and his net worth 500 pounds per week, and his net worth would fall from 4.1 billion to 4.064 billion pounds. His net worth would fall by 0.88%. If you had $20 or 20 pounds, that would be 17.6p. So, yeah.
And also we'll do it with the post game it was, but the last one was like that player, I think, for the Pelicans. Zion.
Yeah,
Zion.
Zion's
like 20. He's only like 20 years old, right?
He's on his rookie. He's on his rookie deal, and he's paying for the workers in the stadium,
covering them for 2 months. And the owner of the whole
is a billionaire.
Has not lifted a finger, which is a good reminder that workers are workers.
Get rid of owners. We need to get rid of owners. No owners in sports. Fuck those guys. They don't do shit. Get them out.
Speaking of, Brady just signed with the Buccaneers. I hope you.
I know. That was amazing.
What a stupid thing. I hope that they go 4-12.
They have a pool in their stadium though, so
that's dope.
No, that's the Jaguars. They have a dumbass. They have a dumbass pirate ship with a cannon. What?
Yo, dude, we've got frankly sick of winning. I don't know like how much more winning as an institution we can handle. So like in the spirit of like, let's just socially isolate fucking Super Bowl rings.
So, yeah. Can you believe that Gisele Bundchen's gonna move to Tampa Bay and Tom Brady?
Yes.
Actually, so awesome.
Yes, I actually can believe that.
Speaking of Florida, though, early results in, Bernie's.
Oh, here we go.
20, 30 points. What is it?
What's the result?
I'm trying to check on my phone while not being rude.
Up here. I'll get some.
I mean, Bernie's, even in the best of times, Bernie's not going to win Florida.
No, I get it. It's just, but like, who knows with the polling at this point,
Right.
Like,
well, I want to talk to you. I'm going to do like really quick plug, and then I want to talk about that actually before we trash Warren. So
yeah,
guys, if you can, go to patreon.com/TMBS. We have a massive amount of content for you guys to jump into. So if you haven't pulled the trigger yet, do it. We have a lot of patrons. If folks, need a deal to want to stay on, but need a deal, hit us up. We'll figure it out. No problem. And if you're watching this, hit us in the super chat. It's cool. It helps. Matt, can you throw that screen up too, real quick?
Oh, which one? Your book?
The book.
Okay, 1 second here.
So people have been asking me forever, and I feels like I'm very pleased to finally say that the book is available for pre-order, and you can get it on Amazon. You can get it directly at the publishers. But I want to give a little shout out to a friend of the show. I think it's called Red Emma's. It's an independent bookseller in Baltimore.
It's a great. I used to go there all the time when I lived there. It's great.
Yeah, Colin's a friend of the show, and I think we actually met him in Philly at the live show that all of us were at. You can buy it there. You can pre-order it there. So I would recommend that, because I think supporting independent booksellers is awesome in general. And, instead of supporting, I'm sorry, I sent you, it's another link, Matt.
Okay. Yeah. Which,
it's in your email.
It was on the email. It was so.
That's so awesome, Michael.
Thank you so much.
That's so exciting.
Yeah.
Read it. Can I read it on my little Kindle?
Yeah, you can. It's definitely available in Kindle. Everybody who's asked that it is available in Kindle. There it is, Matt. It's available in Kindle. Against the Web, a cosmopolitan answer to the new right. grab it, pre-order it, wherever. The book is ready. I think the official date is April 28th. A lot of people have been pre-ordering it. We haven't really talked about it yet. So I'm stoked and thank you. As of now, we've still not canceled the Boston live show in June. We'll obviously be playing that by year, but you still definitely have time to think about that. Austin is rescheduled for July. That's another one. Obviously, we're playing by year. You can either get a full refund or switch your ticket over. And if it is, if it is in any way dangerous, we'll cancel both of those shows too. But we're trying to have a little like Trump style optimism over here. So we're going to be back. It's going to be great. Boston live show is going to happen. Austin, we're going to be flying like you wouldn't believe. All right. Joining us now is Emma Vigeland, who joined us before. She just was like, it was her time.
I don't know how this tech works. So I just thought I'd be in the waiting. And now I just joined your show.
That was awesome.
Dropped right in, parachuted.
So talk about the DNC. Is there anything on earth, just between the voting and between like the plans that Harris is putting out about, like the Brian Schatz stuff, like is anyone on earth killing what little remains of the Democratic Party brand more than the Democratic Party?
Yeah, so I just want to apologize in advance. I'm at my mom's. I'm kind of getting out of the city, so my family dog is barking in the background.
We see the dog.
He's outside. I can
okay,
if
we can't.
He's a pit bull black mutt, boxer mix.
I want to see him, please.
Yeah, I'll send you a picture later. But yeah, no, I cannot. Obviously, the malfeasance of the Democratic Party in 2016 and the Democratic National Committee is legendary, not in a good way. And I thought that up until this point, obviously they have opinions and they've tilted the scales, but it wasn't as egregious as what we saw in 2016. But what we're seeing today is sociopathic. The idea that they're encouraging, if Tom Perez had come out and said, Illinois, Arizona, Florida, we have to postpone this. I mean, it's not like Arizona and Florida have any retirees in their state, right? No.
Not at all.
Not any older people who could be affected and literally die for trying to go to vote for likely Joe Biden or Bernie Sanders or whatever. I did a little live video earlier and I just said, no matter what the results are, I find them illegitimate in Illinois and Arizona and in Florida. Thank God the governor of Ohio did the right thing and basically said, screw off to that judge who tried to get the election to continue. But the Democratic Party here is unmasking themselves in an unprecedented way because they're basically saying, I don't care if you die trying to vote, or I don't care if like millions upon millions of people choose they'd rather not die than vote and don't come out at all. They don't care about getting an accurate representation of the electorate. They're in favor of voter suppression under threat of contracting a deadly illness, rather than being fair in this process and maybe allowing Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden to delineate their differences for a little bit longer, where that would obviously be beneficial to Sanders and negative towards Biden.
And I've actually seen some polls today that shocked me that like the race is actually tightening up again.
Nationally, I saw at Reuters Ipsos, it's like 3 points.
Right.
That means very little because obviously it's done state by state, but it means something. It's not nothing. And it's easy, I mean, the top suggested search for Biden is Joe Biden Alzheimer's on YouTube, when I look it up, or like Joe Biden little girls or and you can cry and say all of this is unfair and all of this is something that, that civilized people shouldn't be talking about. You think Trump's
deplorable?
Yeah, right.
Donald Trump will. Well, I definitely won't make any jokes about him being having Alzheimer's because that would be unfair. And
right.
You need to have a civil. I want to ask you specifically. I mean, you could tell us. I we've talked about the debate a lot, and honestly, I'll be honest, I find it sort of depressing. So I'm not super excited to talk about it. But tell us your thoughts on a debate for sure. But more specifically, what's really interesting to me, and I hope to everybody else, I hope to you, Emma, is like, it's not exactly, while I was watching the debate, it occurred to me, I was like, America really loves con artists and they love bullshit artists. And Trump is the con artist and Biden's the bullshit artist. And the way Biden lied during that debate, and the way not only is CNN, as an example, going to cover for him, I mean, there's some reports that like CNN knew they were going to queue up the whole woman VP thing, like almost working like with the Biden campaign. And it goes back to this whole like hysteria about how we're like in a post-truth world and Donald Trump is just lying and nothing's real anymore. And we've been trying to say for a long time, like, of course it's Trump, but it's a lot bigger, including just even like, look at the fucking PR industry. Like Americans are very used to being lied to. But I have to say, watching the way Biden lied, it struck me more Trump-like, to be honest, because the old school Democratic lying is in the best tradition of Bill Clinton, where he's just like, well, actually, there was a second bankruptcy bill vote, and we tried to fix the first one, but Newt Gingrich said no, and I tried. Like, all, you know what I mean? Like, all of this. Biden just was Trump-like. Just, no, wrong. I didn't say that. Or if I did say that, it's not what I meant. And totally covered for it. In a way, it was like, okay, so I guess like post-truth and systemic lying is just like what it is now.
Yeah, and like, trust me, I've been grieving for like, I've been depressed about the whole thing too, and driving back from like, I was at Bernie's Super Tuesday party, and like, we're not going to pretend that that wasn't a terrible night. I mean, I was getting teary-eyed like a little bitch driving home. but seriously, I was just like,
title of the video, by the way.
Sorry?
I said title of the video for clipping later.
Teary-eyed like a little bitch. But like the malaise is real, and it's hard not to feel completely beaten down. But I think you're right to say that the lying is not traditional politic lying in the way Biden does it, because he doesn't even try to massage the truth. He just tries to blow past it. And it is Trumpian. Another thing that's Trumpian about him is his bullying tactics. And you see it when he's talking to constituents. You see that he gets aggressive with them. I mean, Trump does a similar thing where, you know, he'll pick out someone in the audience and point them out and get the crowd to be against them. You've seen that at Biden town hall events. And just because he's more charming and more affable in his interactions with fellow senators and important people in his mind, that doesn't make him any less of a bully. And Biden certainly is a bully. And so like when Bernie goes on stage and he says, he's my friend, or he tells, you know, Chris Cuomo, or I forget what show it was, you know, oh, he could beat Trump. What are we talking about here? This is one, I have serious doubts about that, although who knows with coronavirus, in any like reality that we've known up until this point, Biden would lose handily to Trump, but who really knows? Anyway, it's just like, and another thing just quickly about Biden is like, at least Hillary Clinton pretended that she's gonna pay attention to some of the leftist proposals from the left. Like, I don't really see Biden doing any of that.
Yeah, I mean, I do think, on the other hand, I do think Biden is more, you know, he's a better politician than Hillary Clinton. And I think, you know, and some of this stuff is so calculated. Like, I want people to look up, like, his big thing that he's done is say that he's going to take a version of Bernie's free college plan, which is not Bernie's free college plan because it isn't universal, but a version of it, right? And people should go back to 2016 because Biden endorsed that plan in 2016, then dropped it while he was running, almost like it was calculated for this very moment. Like, I basically support this, I'll drop it, and then this will be like the big figure left, right? And I think like people really need to track this stuff. But I just want to say with Bernie, in general, like I have critique, like I'm like brimming with critiques of the left across the board, and I have problems with the Bernie campaign, but I'm not into like people turning on Bernie. Right? Like I think Bernie's better than we are. Like he is a representation of very basic decency and common sense, and has been just, not that he's perfect, not that he doesn't make mistakes, yada yada yada, like etc. But like he has been bombarded from all sides for like years now, like including like the worst people on earth, the sociopaths that run the Democratic Party, but also like a lot of people who are like, you know, instead of when he first announced being like, this shit is really serious, let's go, being like, well, I don't like that Bernie, you know, blah, 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 blah. Let's push him left, you know, like, I don't like his Corona statement. You know, it didn't have enough intersectional language in it, you know, like,
oh, kill me.
He's just like, the truth is like, when I was watching him with Biden, like I thought of all sorts of things that like communications wise, like you could frankly learn from somebody like Tony Blair that would be really effective. Like, of course we have to deal with the crisis, but we have to deal with the long term so there's not another crisis. And you go on a fence, like absolutely. But there was another part of me watching that debate. It was just like, Bernie is the only person in national leadership right now, and one of just like the sort of few people on the American scene who just has like basic decency, and it's not rewarded right now in America as it should be, you know?
Yeah. I mean, obviously, you know, I feel the same. The amount of shit he's taken and just not retaliated in the way that I would have, right? It's because he's that kind of guy. I do think he needs messaging help. I think when he's on his feet in these debates, he doesn't tailor his responses enough to the specifics of the question or the specifics of the attacks from Biden. He'll just go back to his same mantra. And I don't think that that's great messaging, because everyone kind of knows at this point, you kind of have to mold it to fit the conversation more specifically. And I think he's so entrenched in what he believes, and that's all that drives him. It's not some sense of ego. It's not some sense of trying to win. He wants these ideas to pass, that he's not looking at it more tactically in terms of battling someone and getting the American public to see Biden in a certain light. He did go on the offensive. That was great. That was effective. Go to the YouTube.
That was great. YouTube was amazing. That was like the happiest I've been in days.
But my point, same. And I was my boyfriend and I were jumping up and down watching it, like, yeah. And then, I mean, but what I will also say at the end of that debate, as well as Bernie did, I don't think Biden did poorly enough. He actually,
what drugs that they have him on.
I know.
He was more coherent and there than he has been the whole campaign.
Yeah, exactly. So his brain had a good night, and that's bad news for us.
Right.
And because those are going to be fewer and far between. I mean, remember when he said he was going to be a one-term president? Like, I don't even know how far off that is.
Maybe he thinks a term is 4 months.
He forgot. He doesn't know what term.
It's going to be 4 months. I got it, Jack. All right, so Emma, first of all, I want to just say that I tweeted out the other day that I'm accepting apologies from people who gave me shit about Marianne Williamson, who was always the only second choice.
Okay.
And of course, there was no second choice because Bernie was the only choice.
Mm-hmm.
And also for simps who liked Elizabeth Warren.
Right.
I want to say, first of all, props to you. You liked Marianne.
I did like Marianne, and I still like Marianne.
Well, of course. We're totally vindicated in liking Marianne. She's better than all of these people.
Yeah.
And she's about love, which is dope. Now, I'm not going to, all right. Do you want to apologize about liking Elizabeth Warren?
Look, no. I don't want to apologize. I mean, because I supported Bernie, but
Yes, you did. Everybody should remember, before you get all trigger happy, that Bernie was Emma's vote.
I think I will apologize for underestimating her massive ego. That's really what's been gross, is that I did think, and I just think now, she doesn't have any principles outside of the banking stuff. Like, it's the way that, and I still think, again, I don't think primarying her is an effective use of resources. If Bernie were to be president, she would rubber stamp whatever.
Hard to agree, but I'll
fascinating.
Hard to agree.
Why? Tell me.
Well, all right. 3 reasons. One is she is so emblematic of how totally weak the left is. And this is somebody, like, let's be real. Like, I feel like Warren, like, all right, here's the deal. This is somebody who basically started doing politics in like her 50s. She had no, like, in fact, from what we do know, she was like very much on the right. And
she was a Republican for a while.
And also like talked at the Federalist Society. And frankly, like all of these things that, like, you know, not to relitigate everything, but like when it came out that she did that corporate consulting stuff and had clients that were questionable, everybody flooded the end zone with like, no, it isn't, like, this is complicated, blah, blah, blah. And honestly, like, I don't care what it was. It should have been used to totally kneecap her out of the gate, because this is politics. And there should have never been any, like, they're running together or any of this nonsense. Like, she's the competition. And while she's in there, she's distracting from what the race always was. And the race
but that contradicts what you're saying, is that Bernie's better than all of us, and that's what makes him great. And he wasn't going to meet her in that.
Bernie being better than all of us, he would be even that much more better if he kneecapped Elizabeth Warren, because that's his one missing. I mean, and I think this is also where where people like us need to check in with, because I think that she's a threat and she's undermining like Bernie, and she's never going to get anywhere herself. She has very limited appeal. So indulging that campaign blocks us from taking on Biden for months, which is funny because people are always like, why don't you go after Biden? It's like, well, because the people who watch and listen to me are wasting time not getting on board with Bernie. And we can't even focus on the big picture as long as we're like messing around with Warren, Yang, and Tulsi. Like, these are like the big energy suck, time waste candidates. But but moving forward, like, why?
I don't think it's fair to put her in the same bucket as Tulsi and Yang.
I would say she's objectively worse in terms of like.
And Tulsi Gabbard.
Tulsi Gabbard, yes, because my number one thing is Bernie and like the seriousness of this election. And people who always would tell me that Yang and Gabbard and Warren would eventually like congeal with Bernie or have his back. Tulsi is the only one who ever did that. She was the only one who would come out and say, no, Bernie said I should run for president. Like, Bernie didn't have so fine, good for Tulsi. I mean, you know that I'm speaking from the perspective of like, I didn't feel a need to pretend to be a fan of any of them. I'm like, Bernie and everybody else can eat shit from day one. But I definitely think that, yeah, Warren, Yang and Gabbard could get, you know, they can get critique because they don't have social capital like Warren. But Warren was actually way more destructive and narcissistic in the race. But
well, yeah, but and the thing
is, go
on.
I'll shut up in a second. But I would primary her because this is somebody who has no actual politics, and even the bank stuff. Like, let's be honest, the bank stuff is what leveraged somebody who just does not like. She's not built for politics. She's not built like. That level of entitlement is like I used to think she should have challenged Hillary Clinton in 2016. And I'm like, Hillary Clinton would have fucking killed her because she can't deal with anything. Like, what would she have had against Hillary Clinton? Because, you know, Hillary Clinton would have done the same moves. Like, okay, you've got all your bank stuff, but that won't solve racism. And I have a job to do here. And Warren would have just went, like pushing up her glasses.
I mean, Elizabeth Warren was an extremely effective attack dog against Mike Bloomberg.
But that's a
political
all that helped was push
acumen
more votes to Biden. And that was another thing. Everybody told me for ages, like, wait till Warren gets her hands on Biden. Well, I started.
Never did, yeah.
And I started saying several months ago, that's never going to happen. And it never happens because that's not her calculation. So I feel like Bloomberg won. Bloomberg spent a ton of money and helped divert Bernie, and she had a sideshow with Bloomberg. But
yeah, I mean, the problem with
her because she is somebody who had a small period of time where she did some good work on a relatively narrow set of issues. She has a terrible foreign policy, and her primary contribution to public life is poisoning the well for the best chance that we had in national politics. I mean, honestly, like, if Ed Markey lost his seat, I would want him to challenge. Like, there's just a lot of people, even relatively mediocre people, who aren't just like pure narcissists that would be better votes in the Senate.
I think those votes are harder to come by in the Senate than you think. I mean, I think if under President Bernie Sanders, she'd be a rubber stamp. So, but at the same time, I will say,
I don't think so.
I think I underestimated her ego. I will say that absolutely. And I think that something that the most obvious degradation of, I still think she does have some principles. I would say far less than I thought. The degradation of what she did have really has to do with the fact that she got enraptured in this Yas Queen identity. I loathe to use that term, but this, coastal liberal, college educated, SNL watching, Daily Show obsessive, like cult of liberals who have zero play in the center of the country and with regular people. And if she had made a different turn, that wouldn't be the case, but she faltered and buckled to that. And we saw that she listened to those same folks in 2016, and she listened even harder and steered her campaign in that direction this time around.
I think what our disagreement and my frustration is like, and forget her, like, I don't care about her as a person. Like, look, I don't like her. I don't, whatever. And I never, even when I liked her more than I do now, I never was like enamored with her, partially because there's a bunch of things like, I do think, voting against Iran sanctions is important. I do think having some understanding of the world is important. And honestly, in that area, I can think of plenty, like Jeff Merkley's a better senator than her. Sherrod Brown's a better senator. Like, there's plenty of.
Sherrod Brown doesn't support Medicare for all.
She doesn't either. I mean,
she co-sponsored it. She demonstrably supports it more than Sherrod Brown.
I actually find bullshitting about that way less troublesome than just opposing it personally, because I don't buy her. Like, her support of Medicare
for all. For Medicare for all. I won't go that.
I don't know. And my thing is like, at what point do people like me, like, I just think, because I want like the left to be much more cynical and strategic. And I just think, like, those of us who always said, Warren is not good, this is a massive waste of time at best. She absolutely is not helping Bernie. He's delusional enough to like be thinking that with her, but she's definitely not. In fact, she clearly hates him and thinks that like he isn't as Ivy League enough, or whatever that story they built up. And I don't think that's a function of like, ultimately, like, the buck stops here, and her she's had 3 major decisions in her public life: run against Hillary, no; endorse Bernie, no; and then this time just support Bernie out of the gate because he's clearly the leader, and she didn't. And then by this time, like, I wasn't even like, I knew she was never going to endorse Bernie, obviously.
See, again, this is where my naivete about her, I guess, might just, my attempt to be fair, but it's fair to critique me as naive about
I'm not trying, I'm not trying to critique you. I'm just saying, like, when do we, like, collectively, because I just think there's, like, a bigger, like, who gives a fuck about this or that right call? I'm just talking about, like, moving forward when we assess other people, when we think about other politicians, when we look at other movements, and there starts to form, because in a weird way with Bernie, it's like the opposite. Like, some people have a romantic attachment to him, but, like, he's somebody where everybody kind of coalesced, I think partially because of how intense the propaganda was in 2016. Everybody, even people that supported him, a lot of people felt a need to, like, criticize him and think of, and sometimes that was valid, sometimes that was silly. And then with Warren, it was just the complete opposite. It was just like, this was a brand that was built, like, basically, I mean, 2010, 2000 to 2014, 15, maybe a little earlier if you were reading her blogs and her bankruptcy advocacy. There were already, like, multiple votes that were hugely problematic. There was the whole endorsement game, and then there was just, like, running. And so it was like, and not only did, it was like, no, not only was she not going to endorse Bernie, she's totally going to spend 2 weeks trying to be, like, petty and distract us with bullshit. And I think that's, like, the lesson, like, whoever it is, like, can we, just to be really concrete, like, AOC is great. I like AOC. I think it's disturbing that some people are not able to have, like, oh, that's a little problematic that you're meeting with, like, potentially some, like, questionable Bolivian opposition figures. That doesn't mean, like, I mean, at this point, like, I want a primary and get rid of Warren. But if Warren was just like, oh, she's good, she does some banking stuff, that's cool. But there was a cult built around her that never matched reality. And that's, like, what concerns me. And it seriously harmed Bernie. And that was the most important thing we had to do.
But can we not separate? I mean, for me, I want to separate what, like, one, Massachusetts is, much like California and New York, a large democratic bureaucracy where you have to basically check a lot of boxes to be thrust forward by the party establishment. There's a reason Ayanna Pressley is the most conservative member of the squad and has worked with whatever, just as an example. And there's a reason that there are a lot of figures endorsing Joe Kennedy to get to primary Markey because they, or Markley, sorry, because they want to, they're more conservative and centrist. My point just being is, like, I want to separate this presidential election from Senate votes. And I maybe
fundamentally don't trust, and is harmful in public life. And also, I would say, being from Massachusetts, like, the Kennedy stuff is not about machine stuff. It's about fundraising networks. Markey's not a great fundraiser. And there's several people who wouldn't challenge her. But, like, a guy like Jim McGovern, who's boring as hell and whatever, would be a way better senator than her. He's done work on Latin America. He votes all the same way on banking stuff. And, I guess what I'm saying is, like, I think Shahid has a big uphill battle to go after Nancy Pelosi, but he should go for it. And if somebody comes along in Massachusetts who has, like, actual commitments and is like, I'm going to challenge this. In fact, especially now, because her whole thing is, like, this personal aggrievement around Bernie. I mean, I don't even know where she's going to go in the next couple of years. I don't even think she's going to run again for Senate. I think she might be insane enough to think she could run for president again. But
that's why she's not endorsing. I guarantee you she's going to run for president again.
Yeah, that's a fucking crazy, like, that is honestly, like, watching, as somebody who never liked Warren, it is amazing. I did not anticipate the Trump arc of Warren, where you're like, I was watching her on Rachel Maddow and I was like, oh, she's actually insane. Like, she's out of her mind.
I think her ego has gotten a bit out of control.
Here's the thing. Bernie's a Jew. And my daddy told me that Jews like to lend money, but they're not the ones that should be spending money.
I can't deal with the mamas and the papas. I'm just like, or whatever, the mammies and the daddies, or the whatever.
But she sucks. She sucks.
I hear you, Michael. I hear you. Look,
I understand that she did some good Wells Fargo questioning a couple years ago, but as an actual existing entity right now,
she's in the top 10% of progressive Senate voters. I get that it's not exactly ideal.
But I mean, if you want to use measurements like that, then you should not criticize any, like, you know, then you should be very, like, Sherrod Brown's certainly top 10. Like, that's.
Yeah. Look, but again, I don't think it's smart for the left to primary everyone.
I think actually, particularly in a safe blue state, all the more reason. It's great.
Look.
I mean, Sherrod Brown, you could literally say, probably no one is going to win that seat in Ohio, but Warren isn't even particularly popular in Massachusetts. Like, that's the other thing with her. It's like, she's not.
But Massachusetts has a Republican governor, much like wealthier coastal states. They could put a Republican in office, and they had a Republican before her.
No, well, for like 2 years. It's super unlikely they would do a federal Republican. But look, Emma, I will guarantee you that over the next several months, whatever it is you think that Elizabeth Warren that might do that is good, I will bet you the opposite. I will keep making these bets.
Look, Look, that's fine. And what you might define as like acceptable may be different in my eyes, right? So we'll see. But
you think but like honestly, like a serious question would be like, don't you think the metric changes? Like if Elizabeth Warren was like, even honestly, if she just was running for president and was like, look, I'm just like a kind of slightly center left technocrat. I don't really know anything or think that much about a lot of major issue sets, but I've got some specialization in banking. And I could maybe appeal to a few like email fundraising list lefty people and maybe some resistance voters. And I'm running to compete with, people who maybe supported Bernie in 2016, but basically don't really want any systemic change. And I'm also going to be like competing against, just pure status quo with, Biden or whatever. If she ran a campaign like that and there wasn't this like insane delusional conversation on the left, like I remember 16 months ago, like, Warren might be to the left of Bernie. I'm talking about stuff that you never did, right? Like, I'm just talking like this whole broader, like insane, delusional, stupid conversation about them that her campaign was predicated on. Her campaign was predicated on, at first, like almost.
Well, it was the plans, and I think she does genuinely believe in the wealth tax and genuinely believes in childcare for all.
I guess, but she's ready
that's already to the left of all of the other presidential candidates except Bernie Sanders.
But she's also ready. Like, we all know that, look, the last thing I'll say is that if Elizabeth Warren went to Bernie Sanders and said like, I just don't think a Jew like Larry David can be president, Bernie would be like, I'm offended, but I finished in 5th place. I couldn't even win my own state. Let me endorse you, Elizabeth, because I care.
Absolutely. That's what I'm saying. Her ego is out of control.
But it's a big, but all of their egos, other than Bernie's, frankly, are like out of control in that sense. And there's a big problem that people were so crazily delusional about her that it weakened our ability to just like call balls and strikes out of the gate and say like, sure, like, great, that's a nice blog post, but you have no strategy for it. That's and just to be clear. And I think like that whole, I hate to use this term, gaslighting that they ran for several months, where it was like, maybe you can't vote for Warren, but maybe you're not voting for her, but you can never criticize her. Like I remember, Emma, like people literally getting offended because I would do like segments on foreign policy.
Well, that was extremely fair and important at the time. Because
absolutely. And you were, again, this is why like you and I have disagreements, but there's never any question about, intellectual honesty and commitment. And that's why I don't like when you know, there's all this like dumb Twitter chatter at you. But I also think that we need to like get real, and she's like very emblematic of us not being real. That should have just been like from day one, okay, that's nice, but we're gonna stay focused here.
Okay.
You know?
Elizabeth Warren, though, we will
Now we
say.
need to primary her. And
That's, to me, it's
Pocahontas ads. No, honestly, because I think somebody who has built a whole brand, and the only reason that she is where she is because of this sense of her being committed to things, that she has played a not insignificant role in like shivving the past several weeks. I actually do think in politics you need to punish people. Like that is one area where you need to have some power sense. And
I'm not even arguing that you can't do it. I'm just thinking, I don't really think it's that strategically important or good.
All right, well, guys,
Or
David
smart.
and Matt, is it strategically and good to take on Wandering Dolezal and get her out of the Senate?
I think eventually, you know, we need to start making a distinction between, you know, kind of like left liberals and democratic socialists. So I think if people are in the position to play against them, then it's worthwhile. I mean, I don't know what the question is about resources, in the sense of
no, it's just more
like,
just like building a coalition on the left that people don't feel like they're alienated from.
Well, that's another thing, and that's, you know, the conversation with Adolph Reed. Like, we clearly, the left is not going to have a coalition with this type of voter. I mean, these are like, if you literally, beyond even just Elizabeth Warren, have been spending the last several weeks complaining about tweets or talking about Joe Rogan or saying like, I don't know who I'm going to support because of like my self-care regimen. I can make fun of it and dispute it, but it's also actually like a very clear lesson. Like the base building out of like a left project is not going to happen through affluent liberals. Like they're not here for it.
But unfortunately, Michael, like, and that's why Bernie's losing, the entire party infrastructure of the Democratic Party and the voter that they've incentivized to you know, build their party around that coalition. That is a huge
but that's
part
not
of it.
true.
And
just look at who Biden's getting. Like this is another thing that Warren did that fucking distracted. The truth is like this is a very small group of people with outsized cultural influence. Warren got barely any actual votes. And if instead of having like a woke Twitter arms race with Warren, the Bernie campaign was figuring out how to appeal to like those non-left but absolute normies that are all voting for Biden, that's where the strategy needed to take place. But this 5% of the
that's
population,
on them. That's on them, you know.
Well, it's not just on them. It's on all of us in some ways for indulging the Warren campaign. But I agree. But like what Warren represents is actually very marginal, as evidenced by the fact that she got very few votes. Like that's the other part of this that's just like, guys, like, look, we all hate Pete Buttigieg. That guy managed to get some votes. Like Warren, like that campaign was a total failure. And so like, even just like, and you were critiquing it earlier, like that whole like SNL whatever stuff is not appealing for many people. So Bernie needed to be spending like 8 months being like, yes, I want real change, but also like, don't worry, grandpa, we'll still be like going to the baseball games. And instead they were on like, you know, being like, well, they're all on the same side. And, you know, I thought that Bernie's like tweet about moonlight wasn't like sensitive enough or something.
But the thing about, that's amazing. The thing about it though, is also like, I almost don't even blame many people in this when we're talking about this, because we were so distracted by Bloomberg. We were all so distracted by Bloomberg. And I think that's a way bigger part of it than anything that's having to do with like woke, you know, online arguments with Warren.
Well, I
would,
yeah,
can
Matt,
I want to bring in this Newsweek article. I think is like, who was more harmful between Tulsi Yang and Warren? I think like, you don't
Warren,
really,
sure, because she had more influence.
Right. And I want to bring in this article here. This like is from October before Iowa, but it basically goes into how Warren is drawing Iowa voters who chose Bernie in 2016. And basically, like, what she served as was a de-radicalization agent. Like,
Right.
she off-ramped a bunch of people from the Bernie Sanders thing, and they didn't reliably return to him. And I mean, that was in Iowa before she had even like broken this pact really officially.
And in addition to that, instead of while she was off-ramping people, then that made the Bernie campaign, instead of just like clogging the airwaves with America ads and saying Joe Biden is risky, they had to like figure out how to do their own plans and all this other silly bullshit that nobody cares about because they were losing in their margins. And
but we didn't think Biden was a threat until
I did. I always did.
You always did. You always did. But like
from day fucking one.
You did. And that was one where, you know, look, we were doing victory laps after Nevada, and then South Carolina happens and it's a tidal wave. And I get it. And I think by far the bigger distraction was Bloomberg. And look, it's hard to say. I think the political moment is much harder this time for Bernie than it was in 2016, where a revolution was more appealing. And then you have these shell-shocked, PTSD-stricken Democratic voters who just want everything to go back to normal. And then the toxic mix of those rural voters who were probably just voting early on as an anti-Hillary vote. And like, we can't necessarily say that was because of Bernie himself. I think that's a tough pill to swallow, but
I think that's probably partially it was just the anti-Hillary vote. Although I think that argument's super overstated, because like these are Democratic primary voters. This is not like, I think some of those people might have just left the Democratic Party since 2016. And I also think a third of them did not feel connected with Bernie 2020 in the same way they did in 2016. And that is a critique of the Bernie campaign. Like, the Bernie campaign needed to radically expand its base without undermining what it had already achieved. And I think that is a mistake of the campaign. And it's a mistake of a lot of lefty commentary. And it's definitely something that Warren was profoundly unhelpful in, because this whole campaign was just like straight to the bloodline of all of that kind of stuff. So
and then it goes back. Lastly, then that goes back to ego. So like, I'm not gonna go and call her a sociopath or all of this, or say she stands for absolutely nothing. I will say that her ego got out of control, and that was evident really in a lot of aspects of the campaign. But even if you think more cynically from its outset, because if you're committed to leftist principles, as you said, there was one guy. And look, it looked for a while like she might have a run at it. But another really interesting fact, sorry, just because, you know, when I go to her rallies, I noticed that her voters were further, you know, like were considering Klobuchar or whatever. Although I go to Bernie things, and you'd be surprised by some of the answers that other people gave too. Like, it didn't necessarily, you know, it wasn't other outsiders or Warren or whatever.
People love personality shit.
Yeah, it's bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
But to put a button on like her voter base as this, you know, elite, liberal, coastal, college-educated crowd, their number one priority was defeating Trump. And so a lot of polling, I think, influenced them, which showed that Bernie and Biden, more specifically Biden, was the emphasis by the media, had a better shot at Trump or other candidates or Bloomberg or whatever. And that coincided with her polling downfall. And I think that has more to do with it than like her backing away from Medicare for all, because I think the true Medicare for all leftists were never with her in the first place.
No, I totally agree with that. But again, to the extent big picture, there's all these things become less relevant. But in our circles, like the fact, like Justice Democrats, let's just be specific, not endorsing Bernie from day one is fucking ridiculous. WFP, fucking ridiculous. Like the whole exercise in her, whether we want to say it was an intentional wrecker campaign or whether it was like some fantasy about them running together, whatever, it opened the door for a lot of nonsense and time wasting. And that's honestly what I want us to learn. And, you know, as far as like primarying her, we just need a little bit of Godfather shit. You know, we just need somebody to just be like, actually, sorry, Pocahontas, not gonna work.
What would that be? Not Godfather, but what would it be? Come up with the movie title now.
Let's see, Pocahontas.
The matriarch.
I was gonna say the godmother, but that's
the godmother. Yeah,
the godmothers in my family wanted us to embrace our identities.
You know, Michael, that's just Elmo. That's just Elmo.
That's how Michael, you need to spend some more time in the South. You're
I can't.
Your Oklahoma stab is a little off by like 400 miles.
It's all just middle America sociopathy to me. Emma Vigeland, please stay safe and healthy.
Thanks, you too. Thanks, guys.
And you know what I love is that in that argument, people are either watching it and hating it because we've already said this stuff a million times, or
I'm sure I'll get a ton of shit for it.
No, don't give Emma shit.
It's fine. It's fine. It's not like
annoying though. I don't want to be tagged in it either. I'm bored. Stop. Enough.
Yeah, at least don't take Michael.
Yeah, don't take
Jesus.
Yeah,
if you're gonna harass Emma.
Harass me, but just my hand.
Yeah, harass Emma.
Just leave Michael out of it.
Yeah, just leave it alone. Self-isolation's annoying enough. But honestly, like,
yeah, no, behave yourselves.
Yeah, behave yourselves. And also, like, guys, like, look, like, this is where the arguments happen. You can't,
right.
I'm full on starting to lose it though with the self-isolation thing. It's like this is the first day where I'm like, I don't feel good. I feel like I'm gonna kill everyone in my house. Not literally, but
we're early in the process.
Too much family time. Too much family time.
Be nice to the dog. Send us pictures.
Oh, I will. All right.
You're the best.
Later, guys.
Take care.
Yeah, Mo.
Bye.
I don't know if I buy that actually. I think there is some, like, here's the thing. There's some that is true. She does say that.
Oh, Joshua's here.
Joshua's here. Everybody's just popping on before they're alive.
No, I'm coordinating behind the scenes.
Oh, you're coordinating.
I was told to pop on.
I'm a producer.
Okay. But Griscom's got to do his gem thing, and then we'll
Well, Joshua can be here for that. Cool.
Yeah, that's true. All right. Joshua Kahn Russell is the executive director of the Wildfire Project. He's an amazing member of our community, and we're going to talk to him in a few minutes. But first, David Griscom has an extremely enlightening and positive and inspiring and non-stress inducing and, can I just say again, optimistic view of the economy for us. And by the way, and listen, smartass, why don't you do a Warren impression? This is a good time to explain.
Oh, I can't do any impressions.
Well, why don't you do it?
Here's the thing.
All my impressions, every time I do an impression, I just do a baby voice. I've realized that that's the only thing I can do for anybody.
Pass on that. Matt, can you do a Warren?
No, I do it. I do it similar to yours, I think, actually.
Yeah, but
I don't know. The matriarchs are getting really concerned that I should really twist the knife into Bernie's back.
Yeah.
The matriarchs in my Native American community were really tired of how Bernie talked with his hands. So we decided to twist a knife in him.
All right, play a few minutes of the new TMBS intro music for Griscom to get him into his gem.
Oh, new. Okay, 1 second. Here.
What do we see? I really like it. I like this new music from Napoleon the Legend.
Dude, he's the man.
He is the man.
All right, here we go.
Let's get some jams. All right.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's great.
You ready for this?
Thank you.
No, this, obviously we're learning a lot about our system very quickly. And I think a lot of people are realizing just how unstable global capitalism is. Even just in the past couple of days, I mean, we've seen the complete collapse of the stock market. And, who knows? I mean, there's already been a couple rebounds, but the amount of value that's been lost has just been exceptional. And it shows how unstable capitalism is. And I just wanted to hit on a very specific thing and sort of broaden out from that. So what we're going to see over the next couple of weeks is we're going to see a tension that comes from something that has dominated our production systems for a very long time, which is called, just-in-time supply chains. So that means, it's a supply chain for people who don't know, that's all of the steps that go into making a commodity. And it's actually a lot more complicated than you think. I mean, Wolf talks about this a lot, and a lot of Marxist economists really say that it's difficult actually to do a complete supply chain because so many hands go into the work, so much labor goes into the finished product, that the consumer good that you have, that to trace that back, I mean, it really just becomes exponential very quickly. But the just-in-time supply chain has become very much dominant throughout globalization, which basically that means that, things are getting shipped into a factory, parts, for example, are getting shipped into a factory just right before they're going to be used. They're not really stockpiling or warehousing anything. And that works in some level when, conditions are normal and good. But as we find that life does not work out that way, and capitalism is always, the funny thing about capitalism is it's probably one of the most optimistic systems, or a system that is constantly on the verge of collapse. They always like, oh, it's never going to happen again. This time we've actually figured out.
I think the Fed chair said a couple of months ago that we were never going to have another recession.
Oh, hell yeah. I mean, exactly. That's the kind of attitude. So what happened is like, not only do we have this, very tight, basically, supply chain, but it's become expanded all across the globe. And because so many different firms and organizations are a part of that supply chain, it can be very hard for, like, if there's a factory on one end that's starting to realize it's like, oh, actually our shipments are all coming in late and that's delaying our ability to, to produce. It can take them a little bit of time to go down the supply chain to actually, figure out where the problem is. And obviously with all the stress that's been put on China, we've already started to see some of the tensions in the global system because of the fact that so many Chinese factories have been shuttered and we're so reliant on Chinese labor, and the fact that now a lot of shipping companies aren't able to go into Chinese ports. So even if the goods are there, we're not able to ship them. So in the next couple of weeks, and more specifically in the next couple of months, there will be a lot of interruptions to our system, especially with complicated goods. In technology, cell phones, computers, and things like that. And, those obviously are, second level when we're talking about a crisis. But what we're looking at right now is also the reality that the United States, our domestic capacity for producing things like, face masks, ventilators for people is very much limited. I mean, New York City has no capacity, for example, and this is a city that, is being very hard hit with this. We have no capacity to produce these things on our own. So we're very much reliant on, these global production systems that are so unstable. And so this happened because capitalism puts profit over stability. Capitalism puts profit over safety. And I just want to make the point, and this is the optimistic part of the gem, actually, Michael.
Optimism.
We need to be able to start demanding that we should have much more say in our economy. And this is something, we're going to have a lot of arguments for why the system doesn't work over the next couple of weeks, over the next couple of months. But this is one of the points that we need to be hitting with people is like, well, it's not just that we have problems, but we also have solutions. And if as a democratic society, we could find ways to have more local production. Now, I'm not supporting localism. And for people who aren't familiar with that, that was a very big economic idea that, the problem with capitalism, the reason it's so exploitative, especially now, is because of globalization, right? Because, it's such a wasteful system. And it's definitely true that, globalization and the exploitation of labor around the world is a huge problem. But, if you just shrink the size of capitalism, that doesn't get rid of the problems. Capitalism has always been a system about exploitation. But at the same time, I do think that it would be reasonable for us, especially in big municipalities in areas, to say we should actually set a certain limit of things that are being produced within our area, so that when we come into these shortages and crises, we're not sort of strapped and sitting here wondering what the hell, how are we going to get food into the city? How are we going to get the medical equipment? I mean, it's absolutely reasonable. And also it's very important too, to be able to have more, local industry, so that we don't have what we have now, where we have a complete separation for most people and the actual production of the consumer goods. The United States right now, around 16 million people are working in the service economy, and the service economy was one of the fastest growing industries in the United States after the crisis, after the financial crisis of 2008. And we're seeing how those jobs, one, those are jobs that are some of the lowest paying in the country. They have the worst benefits and the lowest rates of unionization, and also very high turnover, right? So we're seeing the problems when we've actually, in the United States specifically, when like the working class and a lot of like lower middle class people have actually had to make this hard pivot to just like service work, basically to keep afloat. But that's not a system that actually has a lot of stability in it. So, we need to, one, being able to start demand that, like, you know what, we actually shouldn't live in a system where a few people in search of their own short-term profit should be able to make economic decisions that put us all at risk. It's not just the exploitation, which is a huge thing, but it's also the fundamental risk of capitalism that is a decision that is made by a few people. There's the stability that we're seeing now, the inability for us to get goods that are needed, and the environmental devastation that we're seeing, cheap products. I mean, look at an organization like IKEA, which is dominated. It's true that we all sort of purchase these goods, and they are completely disposable and they're very wasteful. And we should be able to have a lot more say in that, especially in a situation where we're probably going to be seeing more crisis because of the environmental devastation that we've done. I mean, the sad thing, the scary thing, honestly, about the coronavirus is that pandemics are going to be much more likely to happen in this kind of environmental crisis that we're living through, right? Because you see, higher rates of infection in animals and those kind of animal to human transfers of viruses. You see a lot of devastation of, environments. So then animals actually migrate out of them, which means that if they have some infection, those infections actually are going to be spreading across larger populations. Anyways, these are all results of the decisions of the people in control of our economic system. And we need to be making the argument that, it's not fair, it's not safe, and it's not rational to leave the control of our economy in the hands of the few. We need to be demanding short-term protections for people who are threatened by this quarantine. That means, low-wage workers, that means people in service industries, but also everybody is definitely going to need more and more support. So we need a larger role for the community. We need a larger role for us as a democratic society, and we can no longer live in a society, in a global environment where profit is put over stability, profit is put over people, profit is put over everything. I mean, this is a wake-up call for everybody, for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Just two quick things before we go to Joshua. I think the terminology of globally interdependent, nationally empowered, and locally resilient, interesting, starts to cover like the idea of having real dynamic global solidarity, all the things we want. A very connected world, a world where it's very easy for people to move and interface and build bridges with each other across all possible boundaries. There's also just no realistic and real way in which, in our modern conditions, we actually need a strong state that delivers certain services like healthcare, like transportation, like housing. And then, we also, that element of scaling up things like community supported agriculture, local group. I mean, this stuff.
That's the biggest thing too. Our food.
It's really important, and our food supply is totally insecure.
It's not even just insecure, it's just ridiculous.
And it's ridiculous.
The amount of waste that goes into shipping food around the globe, and that there's parts of the country that, are food insecure, but yet they actually are like some of the largest, food growers in the country and in the globe. I mean, and especially in so I didn't mean to cut you off, but also like, in South America and a lot of parts of the world, you see cash crops like soy, right, dominate environments where actually like, these communities have the capacity to provide food for their, for people, but it's actually just being shipped off to the United States or to China or to wherever. I mean, it's just a completely incoherent.
I mean, it goes right. I mean, literally it's Irish potato famine,
yes,
orders of magnitude. And that's a conscious market decision. It's a conscious capital decision. Also, did you guys see that fake news satirical article I sent you where it was Elizabeth Warren came up with a corona vaccine but won't share it because she doesn't make emojis?
So good.
Yeah, I just wanted to button it with that. Joining us now, let me give it a 10-second gap between that very low-level joke. It wasn't low-level though. I mean, that actually pretty much summarizes everything. Joining us now is our friend Joshua Kahn Russell. He's the executive director of Wildfire Project. It's one of the most interesting activism, training, and organizing models I've ever seen. You can go back into our archives if you're a patron. We've done some deep dives in ecological organizing, building a healthy culture on the left. If you're watching and you're not a patron, certainly get started with our many conversations on YouTube, including the one where Joshua in studio with us used the Simpsons to teach us a model of how to run a social change campaign. Joshua, welcome to Isolation with us.
Yo, it's been fun to laugh with / at you guys tonight after such a stressful day.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm feeling actually pretty it's been, coasting the chaos. It's every second I feel something different, but it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you have everybody's running around giving each other opinions and stuff, but this is a lot. I'll say for me, I know that part of the reason as an example, look, I'll keep emphasizing everything I'm saying about Elizabeth Warren and the political calculations of this campaign are totally right. I'm correct. I've read this very well. And, people hate that at times, but it is what it is. We've read this very well. And part of the reason that I'm getting so fucking pissed off, I know, is because I have a person close to me going through an eviction process. And that's compounding and other people and man, if this situation was happening, 3 years ago, would I, my God. So there's so much going on. There's a pandemic. There's the solidifying of a horrifying and depressing general election of just zombie people and parties. There's the fact that people are all, even the luckiest among us, are getting stir crazy as hell. So Joshua, some people are going to be interested in tips, ideas, mental practices, mental avoidances. What should we be doing to feel some sense of community and connectedness and sanity right now?
Yeah, where do you want to start? Well, let me just tell you the 4 categories that I've split my life into, and then you pick which one to talk about. So, I'm supporting some elders in my life who I don't live near, who don't have access to groceries, are stuck in their houses and apartments, and don't have any money and are freaking out. And I'm trying to figure out, I spent a few hours today trying to figure out what are everything from Amazon to Meals on Wheels, whatever I can get to deliver groceries, none of it's available. And so worrying how to support the people in my life is one category. The other category is supporting some of these social movements that I work with to adjust and adapt their campaigns in this moment and figure out what that looks like. The others related to our organization, Wildfire Project, and then the others for my own personal health and sanity. Let's start there. Yeah,
let's start there and work out. Can you also explain to folks that you have wildlife in your home? So there's
I live in a jungle.
Very, very sound sensitive, and they should know what's going on.
Oh, got it. Yeah, I little known fact. I actually breed tree frogs. I'm not even kidding. And so I have crickets in these tree frog tanks, and that's probably, if people are hearing it, that's probably what they're hearing.
I've had the honor of visiting to hung out a little bit. It's quite something in there. Anyways, all right, Josh, let's start at the personal.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk. I think in dialectics. So let's talk in dialectics. And the one that you mentioned earlier when you were talking to Emma is about social media, right? Which is that social media offers us connection right now, and it also offers us disconnection. And what I mean by that is a lot of us are hungry for the news, hungry for updates. And, I know a lot of folks who are feeling, deeply panicky, isolated. One thing that happens in a crisis is that people's traumas emerge. And, you know, my partner is a therapist and is saying that like all their clients right now are just like all of their underlying stuff is coming out. And I think that's happening to our whole society in a way. And so, you know, if I know people who are like having dance parties on FaceTime and stuff like that, and that's beautiful, and like connecting with each other, there's real, I guess I just want to honor that like social media can offer us real connection. We're talking on the internet right now. Also though, as someone who's addicted to the news, I know that I can tap into a like crazy anxiety cycle where I'm just compulsively checking shit every 10 seconds. It's like, this is going to be a long haul crisis. And yes, the news, you know, the moment that I found out that the Bay Area where I live went into shelter in place was a big moment. Like you might find something out in the moment that you check a thing. And though, I don't think our brains can sustain the compulsive feeding of anxiety cycles that can happen on social media, and unplugging is really important, and it's really important for me. And you know, there's this other weird moment where like some folks who are out of work have like plenty of time and are isolated and don't know what to do with themselves, and other folks are like mad busy rushing around trying to take care of people, figure shit out. And we're all experiencing like a big range of that stuff depending on your social location. And within that, you know, I've always believed that action is an antidote to despair. Yep. And so whether that's like interpersonally, like calling and checking up on someone you know, or like making a care package for your neighbor, all of the kinds of mutual aid and social solidarity stuff that we're talking about on an interpersonal level is beautiful. And eventually it's going to need to pivot into political action, which we can talk more about when we talk about some of the campaign stuff. But I think that a lot of campaigns and activism, a lot of social movement work right now is being hindered by we can't have gatherings, we can't protest, we can't demonstrate. It's a lot harder to organize, we can't gather. And so folks are pivoting to digital campaigning and online organizing. And the plus side of that is that there'll be an opportunity, I think, for a lot of people who aren't a part of organizations to join digital campaigning. And I think there's some mass-based vehicles like Sunrise, where if you sign up on their listservs, you'll get a lot of opportunities to plug in. Hold on one second. I'm just going to tell my roommates to keep it down.
Yeah, you tell them that there's work being done.
Yeah.
How dare they?
But you know, it's nice. I had in my build, I live in a larger building. I actually just moved in over the weekend, which was pretty wild. But you know, they set up a listserv and like now a Facebook group with everybody in this building so that, you know, people can keep in touch. And if people need help, you know, getting groceries or something like that, I mean, this is definitely really great opportunity too, to be able to reach out to neighbors and to build communities with people that you might not have done so in the past.
Yeah,
all of those things can be leveraged. Anyways, okay, go ahead, Joshua. Have you told your roommates to go isolate themselves further?
Yeah.
Good.
And I kind of lost.
So you're talking about the kind of, well, I want to maybe actually sharpen it if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I want to actually ask you a big picture question that will get out of those four categories, but you can move, you know, any one of those four categories or three categories that we haven't gotten to yet could be relevant, which is, what is the relationship? And we were talking about this earlier, that, and again, I'll always do this disclaimer because it's, you know, it's insane to me, the idea that anybody would take anything that we would say seriously in some respects in this regard, but I'll just keep reiterating, while they are telling us to stay indoors, stay the fuck indoors, please. Be safe. You know, look, go take a walk, get air. My understanding is that that's very healthy and important, but avoid all gatherings, don't socialize, et cetera, 100%. And it's extremely important that we do not allow this level of atomization to become a normal in terms of our work lives, our social lives, our business lives, and certainly from the perspective of going back out with regards to mass politics. So you were kind of talking about that tension. And I just wanted to frame it as like, you know, that old cliche, but a true cliche. You never let a crisis go to waste.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your thinking in that regard?
Yeah, well, you know, I think in kind of apocalyptic terms, and I say that I use that word in an empowered sense, and we've talked about that on the show before, where I know Matt loves etymology and where words come from, and I can't remember if we've talked about this on the show or not, but the root of the word apocalypse means lifting the veil. So I'm not apocalyptic in the sense of thinking that the world is ending. I'm apocalyptic in the sense of understanding, it's really about understanding hegemony, where there's a moment of, you know, the Greek of apocalypse is, if it's lifting the veil, it's a moment when the underlying power relations become revealed and the dominating stories don't make sense anymore. So within the Wildfire Project, one way that we talk about hegemony is we talk about it as the way that dominant power becomes common sense, right? That's one way of thinking about hegemony and narrative strategy. And we look at narrative strategy as, when are there moments when the dominant assumptions that we're all taught in this society don't make sense with our physical structural reality anymore? Our material conditions don't compute within the way that we're taught to see the world. And we're entering one of those moments now. And those are moments of extreme fluidity and extreme chaos. And the right is really good at capitalizing on them. You know, 9/11 was one of those moments that was capitalized on very well with the right. The entire discourse of disaster capitalism that Naomi Klein has built out, and understanding the capitalism is very good at being opportunistic and exploiting a crisis. And we're not nearly as good at seeing the openings where we can actually change the operating logic of the stories with which people use to interpret that around, you know, what's around us. Not because narrative strategy changes anything in and of itself, but because when we change the discourse, it creates the conditions in which we can organize on a material basis and build mass movements. So I'll just give an example that I have to, I'll be careful to keep some details out of it because it's sensitive, but there's a union here that's organizing Alameda Health System workers and has been building up towards an escalation. And these are a whole range of workers in the hospital systems here who are treated like shit, who are organizing around a broad range of demands for their basic dignity. And just as they were beginning to escalate, the virus hits, and not only, you know, in the exact moment that they are frontline workers who are incredibly vulnerable and need to be working these crazy shifts, it's also at the same time that all the rallies have to be canceled. And so now is one moment where we get to ask as strategists, well, we've lost a bunch of potential tactics that we can use. We've lost certain kinds of leverage that we have. Where do we have new leverage that we didn't have before? And I think in this particular moment, like literally this week, it's really reasonable for a lot of us to just be learning how to take care of ourselves and those around us. And I want to be clear that not everyone has the luxury of jumping into like strategy thinking in this moment, but we do need to pivot to that pretty soon. Yeah. And once we find a way to orient ourselves and take care of each other's immediate needs, which is itself going to be a long-term project where we can build, you know, counter-hegemonic forces of building solidarity economies. And you all mentioned some of that earlier at the end of Griscom's piece that I appreciated, reimagining our food distribution systems, everything like that. Not just reimagining it, but doing it.
We're actually doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's very important about starting to use corporate language in that sense.
Yeah.
Like honestly, like there is something to learn. We all understand how ridiculous like the Nike just do it ethos is. But at the same time, like the left needs some of that. Like, yeah, a lot of people have reimagined food systems. They're obscene on any number of levels. And a lot of brilliant people have reimagined how they can be localized, how they can be democratized, how they can be regionally diversified, how they can have like, you know, the best of both worlds in terms of like, you know, trading various food specialties across boundaries, but then having a huge amount of local resilience built up. And so you cut unnecessary travel and so on. and now we got to do it.
Yeah.
Now we need
Yeah.
to seize power and create, we need to do these things. And obviously it's hard, not saying that, but the mentality of, that's another dialectic I want to ask you about. It's very much on my mind. I feel like we need to spend so much time rethinking and reconceptualizing things because a lot of our maps aren't working and are discredited. And so it requires like, very Zizekian. Like you got to sit down, you got to actually think, you got to read, we've got to talk, and I see the resistance to that, and I get it because like things are on fire. But if you don't have the right map, you're not going to put out. If you don't have water, then you're not going to put out the fire.
Yeah.
And then on the flip side, I also see just even rhetorically us talking about like, okay, here's a path for seizing power. Here's a path for doing food systems differently. I think that might be a good cue for us.
Yeah, I have a few things to say about that. One, thinking about doing a thing isn't the same as doing a thing. and that, I mean, it sounds obvious and kind of silly to say out loud, but the left really, I think in my experience, doesn't get that. And I mean, a lot of us who love to think, actually our egos convince us that if we analyze a thing enough and figure it out, that'll change a thing. Right. It's actually a psychological archetype. It's not just, so there's a spiritual component of just embodying a thing. And the way that I think you surf that dialectic is being comfortable with being messy. That praxis is about learning through struggle. It's about wanting to constantly be a student of your context, not being afraid of study, not being afraid of being rigorous, not being afraid of analysis, but not letting that get in the way of actually moving concretely in the real world and being a student of your context. And that, so one of my wildfire comrades, BJ Starr, and I were on a podcast yesterday where we were talking about the spiritual practice of surrender, which activists hate because we confuse surrender with submission. And we talk about there's a certain practice of accepting what is and sort of surrendering, like this virus is happening. Shit's going to get worse. People are going to suffer. I accept that. I surrender to that reality. And then I can regroup and then act where I actually have power. And that surrender allows us to release the hypervigilance of trying to stay in control of every little thing and act where we actually have power and assess where we have power. But that cliche that is in every spiritual tradition of like, grant me the wisdom to change what I can change and to not let go of what I can't. The knowing the difference only comes through struggle. It only comes from actually doing the work. The difference of what I can change and can't change doesn't actually come from theory. It actually comes from being out there and practicing the work. And
this is another reason we all need to be much more like good to each other and hold paradox and forgiveness and complexity, because if we're going to actually do it, there's going to be mistakes made. Human beings are going to be complicated. We can't be running on a cult because it's hard and it's real and it's human.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you guys in this sort of slumber party feel of this, Matt and David, do you guys like jump in here? Like, let's expand out the conversation.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, I like the word praxis a lot. I think that's a very
define it for people. There's always people.
I mean, the simplest way to
know these things.
It's like theory and action, right? It's taking concepts and enacting them, and it's sort of the challenge of actually doing any kind of like real theory.
Can we make it like really, really simple? Like I read an article, some blog post about like I'm going to the batting yards at Hudson Yards, and I read a post somewhere that's like, if I take one step back, or whatever, if I hold the bat further over my shoulder and I connect it at this point, that's a better swing. So I'm going to go down to the yards and test out that theory. Just to make it really simple.
Yeah, no, I think that's
praxis.
That's a part of it, and two, also I think like the theory part would also be like the way you know, the way that you're swinging in itself, like conceptualizing like the motion in itself is an important part too. I mean, it's like,
I love diagrams. I just wrote a diagram.
Perfect.
Okay.
So
here we go.
So this is what we do with groups sometimes. So you start with your theory, and theory doesn't need to be some like intensely academic intellectual theory. Your theory could be something like, we have a group, we're going to bring Michael Brooks to come speak at our event. And if we bring Michael Brooks and we put out flyers at this and that place, and we get these, groups to co-sponsor it, we'll get 100 people, and 50 of those people are going to sign up on our list, and 20 of them are going to come to our next meeting, and 3 of them are going to stay engaged, right? So that's a theory of bringing Michael Brooks to come speak for the sake of recruitment, right? So you have goals attached to that theory, right? Yep. Then you do the thing, Michael comes speaks, and let's say twice as many people come, but half as many people sign up, right? Then you have to reflect. You have to actually have a meeting to debrief it and say what went well, what didn't go well. And the only way you can reflect objectively is if you had goals that you can evaluate against, right? So if your reflection is, was it good or not good? Some people will be like, yeah, I loved Michael's speech. Nah, it didn't really get me or whatever. But if you say, everyone would love it.
There's some holes in this.
But if your goal is to recruit a certain number of people and have a certain amount of those people come, then you can say, well, a ton of people came and loved it, but not enough people signed up, which means we didn't do enough pitching about our organization and why people need to come. We need to have more people with clipboards next time. Mm-hmm. So then that revises your theory. The next time your theory is, we're going to have, Griscom come and speak, and we're going to have twice as many clipboards, and we're going to advertise in this and that place. Then you do the action differently as a result. So this is a cycle that's spinning, where it's a way for you to be a student of your context, but it requires having clear goals that you're evaluating against, a time to actually reflect. And this is the thing about this moment of crisis that's useful to emphasize for activists, is if you're always in crisis response mode, where this is the dialectic you were talking about. If you're always doing, and not reflecting, then you're going to keep reproducing the same actions. And that's the trap the left has been in many regards. And so this is just nothing more than being a student of your context. But the other key that's worth emphasizing for folks who are trying to organize is most organizers have this cycle going on in our heads all the time. But if we don't do this with our whole group, right? If it's not like involving the rank and file membership of an organization, you're not actually building leadership, you're not doing political education, and you're not like supporting folks to learn how to self-govern and manage their own work. And you're tuning into like, you're becoming all of the problems that are with the nonprofit industrial complex or the professionalization of activism. So I could go. I do whole workshops.
I'll have something to add to that in a second. But Griscom, I interrupted you. I just want us to try to be mindful of defining terms. But please finish what you were saying.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was just saying that I think that praxis is something that's very, very important, because I think that there's a tension that we've been seeing. I'll talk specifically about like, DSA and people who identify themselves as like socialists, or people use the word, leftist or whatever, between, reading theory, like specifically like going back and like doing some of the work of like, Marx, or even reading like Laclau or Zizek, these kind of ideas. And then there's people who do that, and then they are just completely separate from action. And I think that that's something, especially people around, universities, like, I come from the philosophy department, that's what I studied at university. That's a huge divide, right? Between the people who are out there, doing organizing and doing events and being engaged in political organizations, and then people, spending all of their time trying to argue about finer points of theory. And I think that in this country specifically, we have a real tension when it comes to realizing that, sometimes spending time with the text actually can have value and benefit for you down the road. Look, trust me, like, I understand the tendency too, but it's like, the kind of fixation that like, the only way to learn anything has to be, direct hands-on. I think that we're learning a lot right now in the US on the left. It's very exciting that we have a kind of like growing left movement here. but we're learning a lot, I think, about the kind of like structural difficulties, for example, of like running campaigns within the Democratic Party. We're learning a lot about, you know, the media bias and how powerful of an engine that is. We're learning a lot about ideology. And I think that, you know, it's very important that we don't retreat back into this kind of like marginal, like left that just sits around reading and has good groups and nice conversations, you know.
We're not doing coffee shop shit here.
Yeah.
But I think,
yeah,
I just want to underline, because we're, you know, well, actually, I mean, we don't have to be that mindful of the time, but I just want to underline, like, in the introduction to class notes and in the post game for patrons, we're going to be doing some readings. Read Adolf Reed. Yes, there we go. Yes, right there. His critique of like every single modern tendency in the left, from like sub-Marxist pockets to identitarian, like he's just nailing it. He's nailing it. He's just hitting like again and again and again. He sees things crystal clear. And what you realize when you're reading it, and this goes to what you're saying, Griscom, is it's like if you don't, and you know, Reed is a super clear writer, and you know, folks can read and understand, and you know, it's another thing to be balanced about is you don't, you know, this academicization of what should be like really broad and common discourses is also a problem. But like, if you haven't read that introduction, you're almost certainly going to replicate a lot of mistakes that are a product of a historical moment before a lot of us were born, that just help contextualize. And so, you know, there is that, you know, push and pull, and actually thinking and getting grounded in where we're at is really important. And also what Joshua is also pointing to, among other things, is some people are allergic to the word spiritual. I don't care, you know, whatever word you want. There's going to be some like inner capacity building that is going to also need to be part of the mix too. Anyways, but yeah, just take it from there, guys. I just wanted to kind of bring stuff together a bit.
Let me just piggyback on your. Oh, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hear you.
Oh, great. On your emphasis with class notes, because it's part of my quarantine reading list. And one of the things that's so helpful about it for me is to see what were the conditions that gave rise to different left currents at different points in the last 50 or so years. And then how have they mixed and commingled into our current landscape? And it helps me actually have compassion for people who exhibit some of the toxic tendencies of the left. You know, my organization, the Wildfire Project, we are a counter-hegemonic project that is focused on shifting the culture of the left. And even us, with all of our whatever, we try to have a lot of compassion. Sometimes we just get mad frustrated with like how self-marginalizing and insular the left can be. And actually, the way that Adolf Reed charts these lineages helps us understand, at least, you know, where these ideas came from. And they came from political conditions that are no longer the case. And it can both help us understand that, like, actually, some of these ways of thinking made sense given a certain kind of deprivation of like post-Cold War, you know, like the death of the left in the US. And you can then lean into it and say, oh, we don't need some of these politics anymore because we're actually in a resurgence and in really fluid, chaotic conditions that give us plenty of opportunities. And it lets us not need to stay attached to the limitations of the left and actually kind of forgive the left for its own bullshits and say, okay, I understand where this came from. Also, we're in a different moment. Let's let it go. And I think that's what I want to take from Adolf Reed into my own organizational work and supporting groups to let go of some of these tendencies.
Joshua, you'll be talking with us again really soon. And I will say, you know, sometimes for patrons, we did a 2-part training course for Comrade and above patrons, which was super informative that Joshua did with us. And we're going to do another one of those things again soon. And also he will be back on the show many times, both during our isolation time and also post-isolation. which I think all of us are getting pretty hungry for. But Joshua, before you go, is there anything you'd like to leave us with? And as always, I just appreciate you, brother. I really do.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. I mean, I just really appreciate you guys. I appreciate your rigor and your clarity and your levity and just like the way that you have fun and are serious. It's exactly the balance we need to strike. And would love to encourage folks to check out wildfireproject.org. If you want to hit us with wildfireproject.org/donate, we'd be grateful. And to just, if you are someone who's stuck at home and you're into this notion of, again, empowered apocalypticism is understanding that old worlds are dying and new worlds are being born constantly. There is part of my reading list right now is a book on climate change called We're Doomed, Now What? And, I don't agree with all of it, but it's certainly stimulating. There's also a book that I helped write called Beautiful Trouble, which is a thick ass tactical manual for organizers. And it's super creative. There were 138 of us that wrote it together. And then the other piece, I think there's a lot of wisdom within the climate justice movement right now for this particular moment, because we've been dealing with the context of what happens we've been dealing with the context of systems collapse. And so there's a lot of really useful thinking. And 12 years ago, I helped write an organizing manual called Organizing Cools the Planet. And it feels in this moment perhaps useful for folks who are looking for an anchor through the chaos. But I'm just so grateful to be on with you all. And actually, okay, let me give one more. I know this is a lot of reading, but maybe folks will have some time. The other book
they should listen to. Damn, come on.
Yeah, okay, I'll give an album too.
Right.
But the last book is called Hegemony How To, A Roadmap for Radicals. This is my homie Matthew Smucker, who's also on the Wildfire Project board. And it's about getting out of the subcultural left into mass movements.
And of course, please read Mass Notes, everybody.
Read it and then listen to Chronics. Listen to
Chronics. If ever there was a time for people to finally wake up and listen to Chronics, I have no idea why people have been lagging. Chronics is good. Chronics is life.
That's
also
right.
Kofi too.
And John 9. John
9. Can you show a John 9 record?
Yeah. Here's one that she is if you're one of these people who is going on the stress cycle of social media news feeds right now and you need something to calm your fucking nervous system, John 9 is the person to listen to and just tune into what's not changing. The sunset right next to me, that's not changing. It's we'll make it through. Yeah, thanks y'all.
Joshua Kahn Russell, love you, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah. See you, Joshua.
Joshua's amazing. All right, guys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take about a 10-minute break. Then we're going to go to the post game for patrons. If you're in a position to, this is actually a great time to become a patron. We have two patron episodes coming out. We're going to do a deep dive with Branko Maricic on Joe Biden. And then, David, do you have any idea how to pronounce the gentleman's name?
No, Friday. You know what? I actually don't. Sorry.
Recco Harvit, who has a new book out called Poetry from the Future, Why Global Liberation Movement is Our Last Civilizational Chance. And he also has a really fascinating perspective on Tito and Yugoslavia. It's really long form philosophical and kind of non-aligned. I mean, I don't use that terminology that much, but I think people can sense my strong intellectual interest and kind of emotional identification with the non-aligned movement. Mm-hmm. This Sunday, we're going to do a think tank, which is usually for patrons, but instead it's going to be like this. It's just going to be all having us socially isolating with you for a long YouTube stream where we'll take some patron questions. If you want to, you can pre-order my book. Go to patreon.com/TMBS. Go to Literary Hangover as well. Soon enough, I'm sure we'll have something that David can point to as well. But I will also just say in the meantime, we're going to be self-publishing. Really simple. We will pay somebody to proofread them because God knows we need that. But we're going to be doing like TMBS guides to things and self-publishing them through Lulu, which I'm really excited about.
Oh yeah.
Kind of like basically summarizing, because there's so much content at this point. So it's sort of like a cross of summarization, but also elaboration. It's not just going to be like reprinted commentaries or stories or anything. There'll be a bit of that, but it will be written and expanded out a bit. And of course, you know, there's all this, anyways, you'll learn more about that. You go to tmbs.fm to follow everything. I'd really become a patron today. But, you know, first and foremost, tip the hell out of your service workers, and look for mindful ways to contribute, and we'll all get through this and we'll build something better. Waz is going to join us for the post game. We're going to be doing some, what book reading is everybody going to do during the post game? We've also going to do a bunch of, you know, talking about how the Democrats might be on the verge of taking the criminal negligence of the Trump administration and possibly turning it into a political win for them, because their addiction to means testing is practically like train spotting at this point. But anyways, what books are we looking at? What books are we reading from? We're doing a little cozy book reading in the post game.
Are we gonna do that now or then?
No, in the post game. I'm just teasing people before.
Dude, I got some Zizek and a little Althusser to talk about, but also Hermann Hesse is one of my favorite writers. You definitely need
Steppenwolf. What?
Steppenwolf, yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Oh, that's a good. Steppenwolf has a lot of dialectics in it. Matt, what about you?
I'm going to be reading this Chuck Schumer tweet here.
No way.
God. Give us some. Come on, give the people some inspiration.
Yeah, I'm okay. Oh, wait a second.
We'll dunk on that though too.
Yeah, no, here.
Big Waz is going to call in.
I'm going to pull from Orwell.
Sweet.
So
I've got a section from Class Notes, and I've got a section from The Golden Ages and Us, dissing Malthus, which I mentioned at the beginning, but it's on my brain. Patreon.com/TMBS. We'll see you guys in the post game.
All right.